Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this values workshop. I am very excited to lead you through this because values was really the discovery that changed my life. When I found out what my values were, everything started to change. And that was back in 2018. So values have become a really important part of my foundation for my life and for my business and for everything I do. And I lead with my top connection, my top value, which is connection. As a lot of you who know me might already know this. So this morning, I just want to take you through what values is all about. Okay, so let's get stuck in. A lot of you will know, of course, your values, or maybe you will think you know your values, or you might have done your values, I don't know, months, maybe even years ago. And perhaps, my question to you is, how often do you revisit your values? Because the values elicitation really is a good thing to do, probably, I would say, every 6 months. And you will find that your core values probably won't change so much, but other values do. And in fact, not so much they even changing, but they shift in the hierarchy. So living our values every day. Okay, we hear that a lot, but what does it actually mean? Because a lot of people, and you might feel this way, and I do sometimes as well, unsettled or unsure, indecisive, or not totally knowing quite where we're going all of the time, every minute of the day. And yet our values will be our steer. And it may sound crazy, but it's really actually quite easy to forget to refer to our values. Forget, oh, wow, I have this incredible life compass that is, embedded within me. Why don't I use it? Okay. And so it shows up all the time. And I think, the key word that I always like to use is compassion, because when we find ourselves giving ourselves a hard time about something or beating ourselves up, it's like, oh, whoa, hold on a minute. Do our values include brutality to self? No, they don't. So bring some compassion in, go back to the values. They will help you to assess what's happened as well and deconstruct any problems or blips along the way. So let's talk about values in sense of, the authentic alignment, because what we really want, and this is, a buzzword, maybe it's overused, people get desensitized to it, but authenticity is a really, really important word, and so is alignment. So the way I see that is really aligning with yourself, who you are. So let's have a look. We're going to go through what are the core values. I'm going to talk to you about what I call my values awakening. It's a huge shift in my life. Authenticity, we've touched on. We're going to talk about the values gap, alignment, beliefs, end values, and then the hierarchy. Okay, and how you actually do the values elicitation. I'm going to take you through that process. So core values, they represent our deepest held beliefs. What's important to us and why, they reflect that, okay, from the inside out. So you could say that there are guiding principles, and they're certainly a reference for decisions. In fact, when you know your values, your decisions become so much easier to make. That doesn't mean that it's always comfortable for yourself or for others. So living in your values doesn't mean that everything's a breeze and it's so easy, because it's actually not. In fact, sometimes it can be quite challenging to stand up for your values. This is why it's very important when we get to the alignment piece. How do you align? Because you don't really want to be having to battle your way through life with your values against everybody else's that are different. That becomes hard. So what values brings you as well is an awareness of self, of who you are, because often in life, you'll find that you react to things. You'll react to things along the way, and pre-becoming a coach or a business owner, entrepreneur, whatever title you like to give yourself, any self-development, prior to that, you will have just experienced life in a way through emotions and kind of what you think, etc. And so there would have been a lot of responses and reactions, conflicts maybe. Certainly when I think back to my working days, my office days, there was a lot of conflicts there. And that was most likely down to value clashes as well. But nobody had language on that. Nobody had as much awareness. You just kind of get through it. But when you raise the awareness in terms of, I actually know what my values are, I know how they work for me, I know what they mean, and I know how they steer me, things for you can become a lot easier. The clarity for yourself and for your business becomes a lot clearer, and everyone else can kind of continue to like go crazy and fumble around you, but you're going to have a lot more of navigation tools, if you like, with your values. So that they also give you a basis for reflection and self-inquiry, because like I said before, when something has gone, let's just say it's gone not quite to plan, not what you hoped it would be, and that could be personally or professionally, it doesn't matter. It's like, let's sit down and look what's happened here. So if you have a conflict with somebody, and maybe it's somebody that you normally get on really well with, or maybe it's a family member, or it strikes you anyway and it upsets you, and you sit down and think, what has gone on here? What's happened? How did it go from like this to this? This is not what I want. You can sit down and you can look at your values and think, okay, so how has this arisen that I've had conflict in this situation? And you can look at your values and you can look at those words, and you will know everything that's within those words, because they're not just high level words, and I'll get to that. Everything that is encompassed and embodied within those words, under all the layers of that one representing word of your value. And when you can reflect on that and you can see what's happened, you can probably notice some of your own behaviors and responses and reactions will be because said other person has said something, done something that has, well, it's literally gone against your values, and it's made you feel incredibly uncomfortable, maybe even angry. Certainly you're going to get something happening in your body and mind when your values are knocked or pushed. That's how you know it's a value. Okay, so if it's just something that you think is quite important, but if it doesn't transpire within yourself and other people, and it doesn't really cause a massive problem, it's not a core value. It might be something that matters, it's not a core value. So a core value is going to give you responses. Okay, it's going to make you really happy, or it's going to make you fume. Okay, so these are really important to note that. And so when you can sit down and you can assess a situation through the lens of your values, you will find a lot in there. Okay, and you will most often find values clashes. When you take away what we call the story and the context of it, it's like, well, that you said, or that you did, is like directly in opposition to my value of whatever that might be. So then you can reflect on that, and you can realize as well a little bit more about you, about other people, and then you can start to go deeper, and then you can start to look at how you might want to resolve that, because how do you work with, engage with, love someone that has a different value, and maybe that does show up in that way. So it's really, really powerful to use your values for reflection and inquiry, self-inquiry, and inquiry of others. Remember, one of the top keys for great coaching and great development of self is curiosity with compassion, not judgment with self-flagellation. Okay, so it's like you're never going to discover anything in that mindset. And of course, your core values will bring you clarity, as I've really just sort of explained, less confusion and ambiguity about what has gone on. You find that in relationships, of course, values are of paramount, and I do mean personal relationships, I mean business relationships. They are of paramount importance, because if you don't know what your values are, and if you don't know what the values of another person are, whether it be a client, a partner, a family member, you don't know what's important to them, and you don't know what's important to you, you can see how that could go. And certainly in the realms of business, you want to be aligning yourself with people that share your same values, because that gives you a foundation, okay, to start with, okay, a shared foundation. You don't have to have everything exactly the same. That's highly unlikely and potentially a little boring as well. But it's just really, what do you connect with people on, and what don't you? Okay, so looking at core values, they are really like I kind of say they're like your 5, because we get to 5 core values, 5 best friends, your 5 best friends in the world. So every time you have a problem, every time you have a conflict, every time you have a decision to make, you gather your friends together and you go, right, you lot, what's going on here? How do we measure this? What do I do? Okay, and you learn to use them as a compass, okay, the compass within. And often you will know what decision you need to make, you will know what move you've got to make, but it might feel, like I said before, uncomfortable. Okay, so it's about learning to stand in your values as well without being aggressive or confronting to other people because they may not share those values. Okay, so it's really learning to have that strength within on your values and use your behavior and your language to represent those values. Okay, so all of these things get really, really juicy with core values. So I told you that I would share a little bit about my story and, as I call it, the awakening. And I really mean that when I say awakening, because as I said before, when I was talking about when we live our lives and we know how we feel and how we don't feel, we know what our mind tells us, we want this, we don't want that, and we make judgments and we behave accordingly through our life. But it's a bit kind of like, loose, isn't it? So, I've always known how I felt, if I felt good or I felt bad, or if I would, be great and really like close with somebody, or if I would fall out with them, or if I wanted a job, or if I didn't want a job, and everything. Okay, so we know who we are, but we don't really have a frame on it. We don't have a language on it. We don't have that clarity, that razor sharp clarity around it. And I certainly didn't, even though I've been, rolling around, and I would say that in self-help and personal development since I was a teenager. Okay, so I've consumed a lot, but I didn't have this values frame. It was quite incredible. So when I started training to be a coach in 2018, and of course my coach training was combination NLP training, and NLP values are absolutely huge. So we started to do this values work, and I don't know if you've ever had a moment like this where everything just starts pinging, ping, 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 oh, ping, ping, ping. Everything's kind of coming together. And at the time, I was in like a really difficult relationship that I would go so far as to say was really unhealthy for me, and had brought me down for several years. It was just an absolute churn of emotion and difficulty. And at this point in 2018, I was trying to extract myself from that. And I do choose and use that word intentionally, extract. And I kind of couldn't. Okay, I couldn't. I've done a lot of work since then, which I totally understand all of this now. But at the time I was like, why can't I just get out of this? Why can't I just end this? Why can't I just put a stop to what I know in my core I don't want? And I couldn't. It was difficult. And I started to do the values work. And I still remember the day. I still remember the day that we did the values work. And I started, listing my own values and doing the work with the group. And I suddenly thought to myself, oh, the values that I've elicited here, they really do not show up in this relationship. They really do not. And one of them, which is still, of course, value of mine, was connection, authenticity, growth, humor, inner peace, and trust. And as I went down the line, I was like, honestly, it was really quite tough, because I realized that my relationship was completely out of alignment. Now, you could say that I had all the love. We have the love, and we love the love, and the love comes in, and it's wonderful, and it's like we're destined to be together forever. But actually, the way that connects sometimes is, questionable, and that's for another workshop. However, I looked at authenticity, and it's just struck me in my heart, and I thought, yeah, I don't feel that this person that I'm with is authentic, which then led me very quickly to the trust value, which then led me very quickly to the connection value, which then led me very quickly to the growth value, the inner peace value. And it was like, wow, it was a true explosion. And what it did, I remember going home on the train from London that day, just staring out the window thinking, whoa. There was a lot going on in my mind and heart at that point. There was a lot of things starting to bubble and come together. And I remember going home, pouring a huge glass of wine, and, really like crying and thinking, wow, wow, now I get it. Now I get it. So what I was getting was I was getting the clarity. Okay, I was getting the clarity. And because my values made me feel so strongly, I was then able to identify what was really going on instead of this kind of like muddle that I was in that had got so complex. And so I realized, if I don't have a relationship with connection in it and the way that I understand it and that I experience it, I need it to be, then there's nothing there. If this relationship is not growing, it's not growing. So the pain that I was feeling was the stagnation, you see, which of course will be the opposite to growth. So the stagnation of that relationship, that situation was knocking against my value of growth. But I didn't have like the word and the frame in my mind prior to that, you see. But as soon as I brought it out of myself, I was like, growth is important to me on every level. Okay, just keep evolving, moving to something, into something, okay, at whatever pace. But this is just a dead duck. This is stuck, okay, stagnant. So I was feeling terrible about that, but I didn't have the language to describe what my terrible was. But when I realized there's no growth here, there's no growth. The connection is very shaky. It's only on a few levels, and that's not enough. I don't trust this anymore. I don't trust you anymore. Okay, maybe I don't even trust myself anymore. So it's feeling terrible about that, not trusting my decisions, not being able to make my decisions. Okay. And certainly there was a massive lack of freedom. Okay, which is one of my highest values also, a lack of freedom, because there I was like bound. So this gave me the power, the strength, the clarity, the direction, and the focus to be able to end that relationship. It suddenly tanked me with the fuel I needed of self-understanding. And I was like, no, of course, I can't. So it came to the point where you can't unknow what you know. So I couldn't do all that work, and I couldn't keep knowing what I knew and then stay in that situation. So that was just, that would have just been an absolute disaster. I wasn't able to do it. So I did. And I got out. And it wasn't easy. But my values led me. My values steered me. And so for me, it's everything. Okay, because it will unlock so many things. And when I do much deeper values work in one-to-one coaching, it is mind-blowing, people, mind-blowing as to what can be unearthed there. So like I always say, they are not words on a post that you think sound great or that are kind of important. There's many layers under values, and it's really a key part of understanding yourself and, what's important, why it's important, and how you're going to live that, okay? And also what happens when that's knocked against. So I'd like you to just think about, just for a minute, how have your stories and experiences shaped your values? When you've listened to my story, your subconscious will have picked that and listened to that and mapped on something to that story, different context. Okay, so hopefully that's given you maybe some light bulbs, a couple of realizations, or invited you to think about something in a new way. So authentic, we love that word, don't we? Authenticity. Let's be our authentic selves and live a life of authenticity. Okay, so how do we do that? Authenticity to me is like the essence of who you are. Okay, it's your unique recipe. It's really, like I say, the beauty of you. Okay, and it's a story. It's your story of reality and transparency. Your values are created from your life experiences, okay, from birth. They're important, they matter, they tell your story, okay? And your behavior as well, your behavior towards yourself, towards others, in your relationships, in your business, in your life, that speaks, okay? What do we say? Words are cheap. Don't tell me, show me. Show me. Because people can say things really easily. Words are cheap, as they say. You can just say what you want, but your behavior is what is going to back that up. A man of his word, a person of their word. Can I even say that these days? So yeah, it's really, really important that your behavior will show your values. Okay, so the alignment, the incongruence, of course, comes when you're saying one thing and that you believe in one thing and that this thing's important, but over here we're doing that. And of course, that's what was happening in my story, in that particular context of a relationship. That's what was happening. I was believing this deep down here, but I was behaving this over here. So massive clash. So, you've got to behave as if your values matter so that people know what your values are, else they just won't believe that they do matter to you. And that can cause a lot of problems, okay? And it's going to feel very inauthentic to you, and you're going to feel inauthentic to others. They're going to experience you as inauthentic. So think about those times when you see somebody, preaching online, all their stuff, etc. And something about it just feels a bit off, and you might watch someone's live, or you might watch a video, or you might read some content, or something just feels off to you. Okay, now that's no judgment put out there. It's just an example of when you can think in your life, when have I ever felt off about something? Or when have I listened to someone saying one thing, so maybe someone talking about, I don't know, being kind to others and compassion and stuff like that, and then you see them like kick off on a Facebook thread and you're like, okay, that really doesn't seem to be, congruent. Anything like that. So we've got these risks of misalignment, we've got these risks of incongruence, and these things have consequences in our lives. Okay, so when we're thinking about being our authentic self, we really are having to tune in quite deeply. And also, our authentic self is only the self that we can know at this point of our journey in our development. Okay, so I think we mustn't be so arrogant as to say how well we always know ourselves and I know who I am. That's fine, it's good. You want to know who you are, but it's like who you perceive you are. And when you do more growth, different life experiences shape you, you might heal some stuff from the past and you're working on things, you will change. The shape of you will change. Okay, and so yes, we're always looking for that core essence, but let's assume that we don't know that, because otherwise we can't always take feedback from other people. That's when that becomes hard. You can't tell me that I'm like this, I'm not. We've got all those beliefs coming in. So we're looking to stay fluid with this, but also congruent, and think about, this is what's true to me right now. This is who I am right now. Okay, and I believe I will always have this value of connection. I believe that. I can't imagine ever not wanting to be connected. Okay, however, the shape of my value may change. So the more that I connect with myself and what's important, the less I might need certain connections from other people. So it's just that it shifts and it moves. I just think of it as like a moving ocean of values. And think about, have you ever been incongruent? Like I was given in my example when I was sharing, my behaviors weren't matching what was important to me and how I truly felt. And that was upsetting me. I couldn't understand it. And so, it would be ridiculous to think we've never been incongruent with ourselves or with others. We're human, it's okay. And these reflections are important because it helps us to grow. You think about how that felt. It's never going to feel good. And when we don't feel good, we need to get a handle on why we're not feeling good, what that is about, and how we can steer back on track. So, how do you identify your values? Well, like I've said, through your experiences, okay? But also not just through your great experiences, through your negative experiences too, through your experiences that were less than, through experiences that hurt you, through pains, as well as through pleasures and joys, because this is when the stuff shows up. This is when the values show up. So I want you to think about, when did you last feel, think of a time in your life when you felt like on top of the world, like that popping feeling that you're just like, whoa, you're there. Okay, take yourself back there now. What was happening? Where were you? Who was there? What was being said? What was the reason that you were there? What was going on? Like, just take a look around you and re-experience that, and start to identify why you felt so happy, why you felt so connected, why you felt so full of joy. Who were you with, or what type of people were you with? What were they saying? What were you doing that helped you to experience these values? Okay. of, you know, joy, connection, freedom, whatever it might be for you, success, depending on, you know, what you're eliciting there. And write that down. You know, just go back to that and just write that down. Even if you've done all this values work before, just go do it again. Find that real happy place. Okay. And, you know, the other side of the coin is, of course, you know, when did you feel terrible? Like, oh, that terrible feeling that we have, and we've all had, where it's just not okay. I felt like that in that relationship. I have felt like that in jobs. And, you know, it's like, why do I feel so bad? What's happening? What don't I like? What can't I tolerate there? You know, because that will be a big indication to you that a lot is going on as well. Because, you know, when we don't have what we want and things aren't going the way that we want and we're experiencing pain and tough times, we're also going to find our values in there. And when I was in work, like any of the jobs I had, even if I really loved them, I used to spend the weekends dreaming of not having the job, dreaming of freedom, dreaming of running my own business, dreaming of, you know, being able to just go and live by the beach, which I haven't done yet, but I will. And wanting that freedom and not to be there, you see, because it made me feel chained and obliged, and I had to do what other people said, and I didn't want to do it by their, you know, rules and values and standards. And sometimes it was okay and I loved it, and then when it wasn't, it's difficult, and I just couldn't bear it. So that really showed up my highest value again of feeling connected to what I do and the people I'm with, and also freedom. I'm not free. And I won't go into this call as to where my value of freedom comes from, but it's a pretty common one, you know, for many different reasons. So think about that as well, and just go through those two little journaling processes there and see what you come up with. So let's talk a little bit about the perceived gap. This is so interesting, I think, because, you know, it can be said that values are created from a perceived gap. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? So the things that are important to us are formed through our models of the world, our maps of the world. And these are shaped by, you know, the way that we experience the world is shaped by our past, basically, and what has been programmed in. And without going into that too much, that's pretty much the premise of how you develop your values. Okay. So I'm just going to take an example here of kindness. And, you know, that comes up a lot when I do values work. You know, kindness comes up a lot and honesty comes up a lot. There's some core ones that are sort of the general human experience. And the most interesting part is like, where does that come from? Okay, where does it come from? So let's take kindness. So maybe you were told to be kind. So how do you know that kindness is important? Maybe you were told to be kind. Maybe your mum or your dad or your caregiver always said to you, you know, you should be kind. Be kind to your brother, be kind to your sister, be kind to your mum, be kind to people at school, be kind, be kind, be kind, be kind. Therefore, creating a meaning within that as well, that if you're not kind, what does that mean about you? You're unkind, and what does that mean about you? Okay, and children are we're always seeking just to be loved and approved and to belong. Okay, so when you think about some of the language that you've heard in your childhood, some of the values that have been input to you, just start questioning where they've come from. That's all, being curious. So kindness, maybe you were told to be kind, so you've got a program of kindness coming in there, and that's not, it's not a bad thing to have, but values can also work against you. We'll talk about that. But you've got a program from childhood and from influence. Okay, so that's one way that kindness could be instilled in you. Maybe you were treated unkindly and it hurt a lot, and that will be a gap. There's a gap of kindness that was in your life. And, you know, at some point in your journey, in your life, you said to yourself, I don't want to feel this, you know, this is so unkind. You've realized, and you fill the gap with your value of kindness. Kindness to others, kindness to self. It's how you steer. Okay. So that's another way that could have created a gap and a value of kindness. Maybe you saw unkindness to others, even if it wasn't to yourself, to others. And that hurt. And that made you feel pain. And so you're like, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to be like that. So you start to develop, okay, this value of kindness. Maybe there was no kindness. And maybe there was lots of kindness. Maybe you know the benefit of kindness. Maybe you were lucky enough to have a lot of kindness flowing in your life, kindness at difficult times, okay? When you were struggling, maybe somebody was kind and that suddenly rose up as like, wow, kindness, that's what I needed. That's what I recognize. Okay, so just really start getting into this. And you know, so think about that in terms of perceived gaps, because what it might mean is when we talk about doing the values elicitation process, maybe every 6 months or so, is that it may just shift. Okay, because when you do have a lot of kindness, or maybe something is healed a little bit more, it may just shift and other values may rise up. They may just move around in their priority. Although kindness, as an example, tends to be a fairly core value, although I do find with people and clients is that they're often very kind to everybody else and maybe not so kind to themselves. So when we work with values as well, we're like, how are you living these values? It's not just about how you are to other people, it's how you are to yourself. How are you kind to yourself? Because you could be perpetuating that gap and not even realizing it by saying kindness is a value, but then being unkind to yourself, you're still running the same pattern. I digress slightly, but you see where this can take you. Very important stuff. So think about the perceived gaps in your life and how they align and where they might have been created from and how you fulfill them and how you live in alignment to them. So, you know, connection, for instance, just taking my own value, because that's the easiest one to example, connection. You know, when I am not connected in the way that I want to be with myself, okay, and with others, I feel that miserable, basically terrible, awful. And so that can then sometimes make me disconnect and retreat. So I'm like, and then I'm like, I'm not actually living my value of connection because I've sort of disconnected and I feel disconnected. So I might disconnect a little bit more. And so it's about learning how to bring myself back online again and think, how do I use my value of connection to reconnect with self? And so certainly, you know, I looked at, you know, where in the past I wasn't connected, how I wasn't connected with myself, when connections had been broken, how that made me feel, what the impacts of that was. And so, yeah, I won't go any deeper, but hopefully I've given you enough that you can start that powerful inquiry with self. So, you know, this kind of leads to when people are outraged, absolute outrage. How could you be so unkind? You know, and literally that fury will rise and you will just feel it. And what's even worse is when someone turns around to you and says, oh, I'm not being unkind. I haven't been unkind. You might have experienced that. I mean, you know, fill in the gap to whatever value, but you're questioning that because it is your value and it's your belief. That's unkind. And the person's like, it's not, I haven't been unkind. Now, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because that person does not share the same value, the same beliefs, the same world map of the world and past programs and experiences. They're not the same. So they're missing somewhere. And that person actually doesn't see that, whatever that situation might be, as unkind. I just want to caveat here that I am excusing clear unkind acts that most of humanity would not deny. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, you know, when there's been a conflict or something and you deem something to be really unkind, and a person would be like, I'm not being unkind. I'm just whatever, and they'll just justify themselves saying what they're doing. But you're feeling that. You are feeling that, and there's no words in the world that are going to stop you from thinking, I'm sorry, that was really unkind. And what do you do when that's someone close in your circle, or, you know, that's your family or your partner? It's difficult, right? But you note here that the values, because you know that is a core value, because it is provoking a reaction, a response, something's happening in your brain and your body and your physiology, everything. You will literally feel it. You know, you might even literally go red in the face and you're just like, what? Like that cat. So they don't have the same model experience, like I said. So they just don't believe that they are being unkind. And they probably think that, you know, being really over the top. And why do you keep saying it's unkind when it's not unkind. Okay, it's just fair. I'm just being fair. So then again, you might get somebody speaking back in this situation through their values. I'm just being fair. And you'll be like, no, this is not kind. They'll be like, no, it's fair, it's fair. So they're leading on their value of fairness. You're leading on a value of kindness. And there can be some conflict there, which is, you know, difficult to manage, but not impossible at all when you understand all of this. Okay. And when you hear someone say that, well, I just need it to be equal. I'm making it up, of course. I just need this to be equal. You're like, oh, that is a value of fairness. They're leading with fairness. They think that's fair. And I think that's unkind. I think someone's being left out, or I think that you start to deconstruct what you think about that and what's going on here before you get into the conflict. Okay. And let's just assume that it's a, you know, generally well put together human being, and they do have kindness as a value, but it's a lot lower down on their hierarchy, perhaps, or it's completely superseded by other values like fairness. Okay, so it's just not perceived the same. Okay. Out of alignment. It's a good phase for out of alignment, isn't it? You know, what does out of alignment mean? Well, when you're out of alignment, as we've covered in this workshop and I've shared, poor decisions, staying in situations you don't want to be in, staying in jobs you don't want to be in, suffering, okay, not doing what you truly want to do because maybe fear or other things or expectations, conflict. And when you're out of alignment, you're probably not going to perform that well in your life, in your business, in your relationships. And you perhaps don't understand that because you're like, well, I've always done so well before. It's not been like this before. Why is it like this now? Go to the values. What's going on? Go like back to base. Go back to base, because there's so many different, you know, pathways and roads that we can go along. We can get very lost in the matrix. Okay, so just always go back to base. A lack of growth is often a sign of being out of alignment as well, and trying to do things that you don't really want to do, that are not fully aligned, but you think that's what you've got to do, or it's what's worked in the past, you know, or just behaving in a way that, you know, other people expect you to behave, or in ways that you've behaved in the past, but you're not that anymore. Okay, it's just that inner turbulence when it's just like that pull push. You know, I feel like I kind of want to do that, want to talk about it, because it can really feel like that. So if you've ever had that sense, even thinking about it, experiencing it in your body, that's that out of alignment. And of course, NLP has a wonderful process, neurological levels of change, which is all about alignments on the different levels within us. Lack of clarity and doubt will just freeze us. You know, lack of clarity is just like indecision, isn't it? Okay, I just can't see and think my way through this. I feel confused. Okay, and that is, of course, nobody makes decisions when they're confused. If you've ever felt confused, I know I have, and you don't make a decision based on that. So you've got to go back to base, back to base. And doubt as well, you know, doubting yourself means that you're not fully aligned with your values. Okay, and there needs to be some deeper work and introspection done there, because if you don't trust yourself, as people often don't, listen, we like to have validation and reassurance from others too. It's kind of like that outside sourcing that we sometimes do. Sometimes that can be really healthy, of course, but if we're just sitting in doubt a lot of the time, go back to base. What's going on? Have a look at the values. So I'm not doing a lot on beliefs, but I think, you know, it wouldn't be right to talk about values without talking about beliefs, as beliefs are the glue that binds our reality. Okay, and beliefs, in the best shape they can be, are their value judgments. Okay, so our beliefs come from our values, which come from our model of the world. Okay, and the beliefs bind it all together. And as you know, beliefs can be empowering and liberating, or limiting. And I remember first doing the work around limiting beliefs. And again, it was a language that I hadn't come across. I didn't really understand it. I remember trying to think really hard to come up with a limiting belief. In one of the workshops we were doing, I was like, okay, because I didn't really understand what that was. And of course, it started to unpack and become a lot clearer to me. But at one point, and I'm happy to share with you, I thought, I don't think I've got any limiting beliefs. How funny is that? And, you know, as the development has gone forward and my coaching has expanded and everything that I do has just evolved and grown, I'm like, well, I think maybe, limiting beliefs are, they're more there than I thought they were. So they give me things to work on all the time. They'll pop up all the time, like little layers. But they are generalizations a lot of the time and best guesses, and they're not facts. They're not truths. Now, you hear this a lot. Beliefs are not truth, but they are your truth. That's what you're feeling. That's what you're thinking. Okay. And so, of course, it's true to you. And so it's not to deny that you have a belief, but it's like we need to start shaking that around. So when I work, I mean, brilliant it was this week. I'll just share this example is that I worked with somebody and literally obliterated a belief. And my client just sat there and looked at me and was speechless, because what she'd been carrying around believing for so long in this particular frame, and there was a story around it, was everything, there was lots of emotions, everything attached to it. And the work that we did, literally, it was in moments, not to make it sound like magic, but it really can be with some of the belief change tools. And they were like, wow. And in fact, I got a message this morning, still thinking about it, still can't believe it, and literally can't get that old belief back. It's done. We're done. We're done. So it's brilliant. So they're not facts, because if it was a fact, then nothing would change it, right? Nothing would change it. So again, just being curious about what you believe, the value that it comes from, okay, and how it's helping you along or not. And of course, beliefs are context specific. So you might believe that you've got to be assertive at work and in a certain space, more sensitive at home. Okay, but if kindness is one of your overarching values, you can still be kind whilst being assertive, and you can still be kind whilst being more sensitive at home. So you're going to be able to tailor and move and groove to these. Okay, they're not sort of constructs, they are guides, guiding principles, and so you need to learn how to use them. Okay, because if you're going to get all assertive at work and then got more assertive, which perhaps turned into a different kind of behavior, well, that's not really that kind. So something's happened along the way where you've kind of like gone into that push mode, but it's not very kind to yourself for many reasons, probably, because that's going to be a struggle being like that all the time. And maybe it's not being very kind to others. But in that moment, while you're in that kind of belief system, you've kind of forgotten about your value of kindness. Okay, so very interesting. And I love this. I just wanted to share this. If I do not believe as you believe, and it proves that you do not believe as I believe, that is all it proves. Okay, great tongue twister for you there to get your head around. But it basically means that just because you don't believe what I believe, that doesn't mean anything, doesn't prove anything. Does it prove that you're right? Does it prove that I'm wrong? Does it prove that your belief is true and mine is false? It just proves that we believe different things. And so when we start to negotiate, navigate ourselves in the world and others, this is really, really important, because people will just get at loggerheads on beliefs. We see it in the wider world, in politics. We see it when people take their stance, their corner. Now, a lot of that will, of course, be built on their values foundation. And so it's not going to shift. But there are times when, of course, in different contexts, it needs to. And it's just to remind you, really, that, don't get into belief wars, don't get into defending yourself, don't get into that, because, what you hold is just a truth. That's your truth about yourself or about others. And yeah, maybe not. What if you didn't believe that? So how do you identify your core beliefs and what we might call your end values? Although I never think that doesn't sound too appealing, does it, your end values? But it's really kind of like these ultimate higher values. And the key questions to ask yourself are, what do I value most in my life? And maybe you might want to take a minute to write that down right now. What do I value most in my life? And just see what you write down. Just see what comes out. And then what do I want for my life? What do I want for my life? We've got a finite amount of time, don't we? And as you get older, you realize that, you know, there comes a point, certainly midway in life, where you're like, ooh, there's more behind me than there is ahead. What do I want for my life? So it's never a wrong time to do your values work or revisit your values work, because it may change at different parts of your life as well, different phases. Yeah. So let's look at this as well to sort of think about getting to those end values. What do I want for my life? You might say wealth. Wealth. Okay, so why is wealth important to me? It brings me freedom. So then you've got your ultimate value of freedom. It's going to take you right up to freedom. Freedom, I've got choice to do what I want, go where I want, everything that is under freedom. Okay. And this value of freedom will also represent a lot of other things as well. So success, commitment, collaboration, independence, it goes on and on and on and on. But it's like freedom, that's what you want. And I need wealth to bring me freedom. Wealth in itself as a value isn't really a value. Okay, it's not really a value of wealth, but why? Why? I mean, not getting too deep into the like money constructs and patterns at the minute, but that in itself will not be enough. That's why you see people who they've made a load of money and are still really unhappy. What? If that's your goal, if that's what you want for your life, wealth, there you go, you've got your wealth and you're still unhappy, out of alignment, values. It's like, what has that wealth been created? You know, what's the gap around that? You know, because actually it's not quite filled the right space. And if you spend a lot of time focusing on, for instance, in this example, wealth, then you could actually end up compromising some of your values and lose sight of what you're doing and why. So we're really looking to get those higher values, and then you can look at the pathways to them. And, you know, because when you're connected to that end value, you have got options, you've got choices, and there are other ways to satisfy that core value of freedom. Maybe you don't satisfy fully in entirety that core value of freedom with money. Maybe there are other things that are important about freedom as well. Okay, freedom in what way? And we start to kind of like what we would say, meta model it down, really understand these values. In what way? Specifically freedom. How? What does it mean? So it's really, really important to get to these higher end values, these core values, because these are going to be your 5 best friends, right? So you're gonna be with these guys for life. So you want to make sure that they are the right ones. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to look at the hierarchy of values process, the elicitation process. And what I would like you to do is to do this along with me. Okay, so I'll take you through it. I'll do a share screen in just a moment. And I would like you to do this at the same pace with me. So you're literally going to come through this process with me right now. Okay. So let's stop sharing that one and let's go to this one. Okay, so here you can see on the screen, this is the values elicitation process, and I'm going to basically do it for myself, and you can go through and do it as well. So what we're going to do on this first list is just basically, I'm going to add in, okay, so you write down now all your values that you can think of. Okay, now you can see here I have a values exercise workbook that you can download. I'll give you the details of that, but there's lots and lots of values on here, okay, that are not limited to, okay, or exclusive at all, but it starts to give you just some ideas about what values are. But for the minute, just kind of go with your own. So I'm just going to put mine in here. What you do in this space is you just do as many values, okay, and things that are just important to you. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and put all of mine in for a minute, and you are doing the same on your side. Just write them all down. this process in coaching is actually quite a long process, because as you can tell, we go quite deep. What else we got going on here? Okay. Okay, so basically you're going to want to have around 20 values down there, you know, just really until you can't think of anything else. When you start stretching yourself to go, what else, just make sure that you've kind of run out of that and they're all on there. And then what you do once you've got all of these, okay, so I put some line down, is that we then go and we put them in order, okay, in priority, if you like, okay, and then we can play with this a little bit. So out of the list that you've got, okay, I want you to put them in order. Just write them down. As I do mine, you do yours. And I'm going to put them in order here. It's just... Once we've got them in the card, we can start to play with them. Success. So let's just have a little play here. Well, I've got freedom, connection. And that a bit higher there. That in there. Okay, so get them all into an order, and then once you've kind of ordered them, we're just going to sort them out. This is the great thing about Trello. So my top value there, I mean, I know this, so but in the hierarchy, let's see what I've got. So you're just putting your values in order right now. Let's put this one up a bit. This is important to me. At this stage, you might also start to eliminate some. And now what I mean by that is you're never getting rid of any values or things that are important to you, but you are actually thinking, well, maybe that comes under something else. So for instance, I'm looking here at loyalty. I've got two loyalties. Let's get rid of that. Oh, I don't know how to get rid of that. I can't see it. Never mind. So loyalty would actually, for me, loyalty would be part of connection, because if I'm going to have a connection that's meaningful, there's going to be a level of loyalty in it. And to be honest, I do have a value of loyalty, but I wouldn't put it like fiercely up there, because I don't believe that people are being disloyal when they make choices necessarily. So I think for me, in this instance, I would be able to delete that. Okay, because I know, not because I've deleted it because loyalty is not important, because I know it comes under here. Okay, so if there's some that can be absorbed at this point, the same as like trust. Trust would come under connection for sure. Like, you know, you're asking yourself, is this actually a whole separate value? Or does that come into that there? Okay, so I would remove trust from my board. If I can sometimes. Remove trust from my board. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. It's because it's at the bottom. I can't see because of the screen share. So I'd remove that, but I haven't actually removed it like trust is not important. It's within connection. So connection is getting richer and deeper for me all the time. Okay. Also love will be in connection. So I probably don't need that as a leading value per se. Okay. Because if I'm connected, I will be experiencing love in some certain form. Okay. And also it will go into my value of inner peace, because if I'm experiencing love, I'm going to be peaceful, and I know that I understand about myself. So yeah, so you're starting to just get these into order, but mainly let's get rid of loyalty ones, but mainly also. So openness, for instance, really important. I could call openness as well vulnerability. Again, that's going to come into connection, because if I don't, if I'm not open, I can't connect properly, can I? So do I need that as a value? As one of my best friends, would I go to openness and say, how do I make this decision? Openness. I probably wouldn't. Okay, so I'm going to, we'll call it absorb. Okay, so as you're absorbing some of these, as you're doing this now, I want you to just, just take your time with it. And then let's see what we've got in order here. Communication is important. Curiosity is very important. Again, with communication, like, yeah, wouldn't that go into connection? Because if I wasn't communicating properly, I would feel quite disconnected. So again, but then communication is a really big part of my job. It's very important. It also goes alongside with trust. So I'll leave that just for a moment. Collaboration would, again, most likely feed into connection for me and growth. Do I want to keep it a priority in myself to always be collaborative? I do want to be collaborative. I love collaboration. However, I think that's still is all embedded for me in connection. That's why when I say connection, I've got a lot going on in there. Because if you've got 5 core values, these have to be really, really juicy with lots of understanding and lots of other words within them. Okay, so I think so. Certainly community is very important to me, but I probably wouldn't be assessing decisions and steering myself on that value. So it's just, okay. So we've got some important ones here. We'll leave that as that list. You're getting the hang of what you would be doing here, but I've basically put these in priority. Okay, and I might bring this one even higher. Over there. Let's bring this one up here. Okay, so truth and honesty. These are interesting. Let's pop these two together. So truth and honesty, you might find that you get values that are similar. What's the difference between truth and honesty? If you're honest with me, are you telling me the truth? And if I've got the truth from you, do I have honesty? I think so. I think for me that the value of truth feels stronger than the value of honesty, because again, the honesty value can be a little bit like the kindness one as well, can't it? Like, they'll be like, well, I am being honest. Like, you're not being honest. You're lying to me. I'm not. I'm being honest. Okay, now take out the blatant lies and the toxic stuff. If someone really believes that they're not being dishonest, you've got a clash of values there. But also, I'm more talking about truth of you, truth of me, truth of the situation. So I'm going to take that into the archive. So I'm going to rather absorb that further up. Okay, so there's my hierarchy, pretty much done. I've done some investigation around it, unpacked a few bits and pieces, and now I'm going to go into non-negotiables. So these are the things that are like, nah, I'm not living without you. Okay, I'm not living without you. This is where it starts to get really tough, and why doing the hierarchy work here and often with a coach will really help to investigate, ask those questions, and find out where everything fits together in your matrix, okay, of yourself. And so non-negotiables for me are connection. Okay, I can't live without being connected to something, to myself, to source, to God, to people, to community, to animals, to children. I can't be doing with that. Connected to my work, which doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless to me without connection. That's how strong that represents in my life. So that's going at the top. And the other thing as well, these two are interesting. So for me, inner peace is very important for a lot of reasons, which means an absence of turbulence, an absence of pain, and an acceptance that is really non-negotiable. This one came up when I was doing the, remember I talked to you about the story, my story, my awakening. This one came up and I was like, oh, that felt a bit at the time a little bit out of whack. I was like, inner peace, that I don't know, quite place. I wasn't quite there with it, but it felt really important and never let it go. And as I've gone through my journey and a lot of inner work that I've done, I'm like, wow, this is one of my besties. Okay, so growth, like I say, it's very important. And that isn't necessarily about either of these things. This is about movement in life, growing. Like we're growing every single day, okay, forwards on our timeline of life. And for me, just to think something different in a day, to grow in some way is important. But even more so, perhaps than that, if I have any sense of stagnation, it literally kills me. So yeah, growth's got to sit there. I don't want to do anything without having a laugh. You know, life is not hysterically funny all the time. You know, I'm not wanting to live my life through the lens of a stand-up comedian, but if I can't find humor, especially in the darkness, if I can't find humor, I just feel like I might die. And if I can't work with you and with people and be around people and find that light moment or that shared moment of humor, I'm like, it's so dry to me. And it also negates this, you know, because of one of the ways I connect. So yeah, it's really important. Although it might seem like a funny one to have and not as weighty as the others, my nature very much is about a bit of humor. Okay. And I think that goes a long way in many ways. And so what else we've got? My non-negotiables, and my non-negotiable is truth as well. Okay, so let's have a look at where the truth comes into freedom. So if I've got freedom, has there been truth? Okay, so well, yeah, I mean, if you've got untruths or unspoken things in your life and all of that, everything that goes into that swirl, you're not free, are you? Because you're constantly gurning it and working on that and just wishing for this and this and so it's very important. But I think I'm going to put freedom there as the non-negotiable, because if I've got freedom, I've got truth of myself, truth of others. And faith is another important value to me, but I really believe that my faith, do I lead with a value of faith? I lead with a value of connection. Within connection is my faith. Within inner peace is my faith. So do I need it as a separate value? No, not explicitly, because I'm not going to go to my 5 best friends and say, Faith, how do we make this decision? Okay, it's not that high and paramount on the top of the hierarchy, but it's absorbed and it's very important. Okay, so I think I'll leave that there. If I've got freedom, I've got wealth. Yeah, and if I've got wealth, I've got inner peace. So I think we can probably remove that one as a value per se. And if I've got growth, I've got success, right? So success also comes under there. So I think really these are my non-negotiables. Surprise, surprise, I knew them already, but I just wanted to take you through the process so you can do your process. And then we have a nice to have and a cherry on the cake, because at this point, people are feeling a little squeezed and it takes quite a long time to go through the values elicitation on a deep level, one-to-one. And sometimes that can evolve through coaching processes as well. But for here, it can feel a little bit contracted at some point. So we have a nice to have. What is a nice to have as an extra there? One that you don't feel that you want to let go of. And for this, nice to have. Okay, well, it's not nice to have. Actually, curiosity is a non-negotiable. That again is going to go under connection. If I've not been curious about myself and about people and about creating communications and relationships and spaces, I've not been curious about that, I won't be able to connect. So actually we could probably put that in there. So let's just put truth there for now. So I like to hear that word. And then the cherry on the cake, I can have my faith. Okay, which is more of the it's not a cherry on the cake, but it's just That's how you do it. Okay, so you can see now that we've got sort of like 3 bystanders there, but obviously collaboration will probably go into growth and connection as well. Same as, I mean, communication and connection for sure. So we've just kind of like tidying up, but we've put language on these, okay? And my success is going to be within growth. Do I want to go to my best mate value of success and say, hey, success, how do I make a success of this? I might do that. It does feel very strong. But I feel that when we're doing non-negotiables, in fact, maybe actually, this is what's great about doing this. Maybe I'll do that, and maybe I'll do that. Okay, so you're just working with yourself. And so now I've got my non-negotiables there. Those are my non-negotiables. And you can see from going through that process how rich these are. Connection's not just like connection. It's got so much that I've worked through and thought about that sits under that. So when I talk about my value of connection, I know what I mean. I'm feeling it, I'm experiencing it, and I know the well of other values and things that matter to me that are within connection. And this is what you're looking for, okay? Otherwise, the values won't be strong enough to steer you because they won't have enough weight. It's like maybe the best friend of the value, you've only known them like since last week. So you're like, yeah, you say that, but I haven't really got that much connection with you and faith. You haven't known you for long. Whereas the value and the person that is your best mate that you've known for many, many years, and they've got all these experiences and knowledge about you, about themselves, like you're going to trust that more. So think about it in that way when you're creating your values. You know, is it weighty enough? Is it going to help you? You know, if I need to make a decision and I go to these values, for instance, the relationship, connection, on what levels are we connected, in what ways, and how deeply, what does that mean to me? I am definitely going to be steering using that value, making decisions around that value, making assessments and inquiries around that value. So there you have your values elicitation process. And then, you know, from doing this beautiful work, you can take those and then you can start looking at how am I now going to live in alignment with this in my life, with my business, how I'm going to do my marketing, how I'm going to run my relationships, how I'm going to make my plans, everything. It's absolutely beautiful. And I hope that you have found that to be a really, really helpful process. I have absolutely loved delivering this workshop. I've enjoyed it myself. I hope that you have really enjoyed it. And I hope that you will explore your values on a deep level. And like I say, you can go to my website, you can download that values workbook. You can also talk to me about how to explore your values on a deeper level and what coaching around values can bring you, because it really is quite delicious. So I will leave you with your values and your inquiries and all the thoughts that will have come out of this workshop. And of course, connect with me. I would love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear what comes out of it for you. And thank you so much for joining me today. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.